students some days. So
Yeah.
we'll filter out.
But we're live. I mean, which is important because you've missed all kinds of
Debauchery.
Just do not use the word banter in Yorkshire at the moment.
Otherwise, you may be in front of a commission. Oh man, you can all go back to Canada. We'll be stuck with the
fallout.
with the fallout. We're live on YouTube for a Tuesday morning. What time is it back in Canada? It's 10 o'clock here.
5 o'clock.
It's 5 a.m.
5:07 a.m.
Well, in our part of Canada,
Yeah,
because there's 6 time zones.
All right, I
In
guess it
Ontario.
could be 2 a.m. in BC.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do some stuff about how it's still 1970 in where Leigh. We can't say Featherstone.
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. Because we're live in Featherstone next week, but we're live here with a smattering of Canadian Grizzlies. If you're watching this live, it's like when we did the European draw. I'm slightly off screen, but representing Canada with a shirt I've had for about 20 years, and I still fit with it.
Yes.
Nicholas Mew, who's been on the programme before. Before we introduce everyone, how did you find us in the first place? I know you were listening when we were on Radio Yorkshire a million years ago.
Basically, I was seeking out any and all information I could. As I started following rugby league, I was trying to absorb as much as I could and learn from people who were involved in the game and who could teach me about the history of the game and the different teams. And so it was recommended to me. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who recommended it, but I started watching the show and became a regular watcher. It just so happened that at the time, my what's called planning time at school matched up perfectly with when the show was going live. So I was able to spend an hour a week watching the show and learning. And then I sent you guys some maple syrup, and you got bribed, and then you've been actually talking to me ever since, which was your fault.
I remember the maple syrup now. Where did that end up, Phil?
I couldn't possibly compromise
We,
myself.
we would hope on a stack of pancakes.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
exactly.
Safe to say it wasn't wasted.
Good.
Nicholas, you've introduced us downstairs. Who is everyone here?
We have Greg Furyk, Fury, or G Money. We have Michael Steer right there, Mike, and we have Jarrett Muldoon, just Doon.
Just Doon. That is, you've got proper nicknames. We don't have nicknames anymore. This is the problem with rugby league. we need more nicknames.
Well, we try. Jarrett's been sporting his for
Decades.
25
Decades.
years.
There are little mammals living in his beard.
Are they allowed over? I don't know.
I had that or last night's dinner.
There's definitely some pastry in here somewhere.
Pastry and remnants from Akbar's.
How are you finding the hospitality, as Scotty would call it over here?
Absolutely
Yeah, it's been
amazing.
Everybody-
We really, like yesterday, we spent a nice day in York, which was fantastic. Walked around the wall and got to see quite a bit. And Leeds has been great. Like really,
Everybody's been
the
so welcoming.
restaurants
It's been
have been
fantastic.
amazing. Everybody
They're just
from the
grateful
staff,
for
from the
business
hotel,
these
all the way
days.
through.
Yeah, a table for 20. Yeah, come in, have whatever you want.
It's actually it was actually significantly more difficult going and getting that booked because a lot of people were like 20. Do you mind?
Yeah.
That's not happening.
Everything's back to normal now.
Well, when we were trying to do the booking, what was happening was we were saying, and the gentlemen were saying, well, we're 22 of us. We're a rugby team from Canada, and that. Oh no, sorry, we can't do that.
Because people think the other rugby. You see, they in this country. Obviously, in Canada, there's no everywhere else apart from the United Kingdom. There's no negative connotations towards anything. But when people think rugby tour in this country, they think
Drinking aftershave.
yeah, and urinating on each other, and stuff like that. So I mean, obviously, you don't get up to anything like that because you're not from public schools in England, but.
Well,
That's
it's only
the
been
negative
4 days.
connotation.
I think
Let us work into that. We'll have that on.
we should
on point.
start by dispelling a myth, because you're here clearly to play Masters Rugby League. It's brilliant that you chose to tour when, let's say, other nations didn't. But everybody keeps saying, it's a really convivial atmosphere, it's lovely, every game finishes 0-0, we all buy our opponents a drink afterwards, and that's what it's all about. To which, that's absolute rubbish, isn't it? You want to win every single game you play. It's intensely competitive, and you haven't come over here for a 0-0 draw.
Well, I think it's fair to say it's a little bit of both. I mean, after the game, we're very happy to share a pint and everything, but when you're on a field, you're not there to be walked all over. Our first game that we've had was fairly intense. Picked up a few injuries even in training, and we didn't come all the way to, you know.
I mean,
Although it ends 0-0, but everybody knows the tries that were scored.
Yeah. We
And
can all count.
If you're, you were speaking about this yesterday. If you're playing competitive sports, you're okay with taking a loss. I think you should be in competitive sports. Everybody plays to win and succeed, right? So
Our cab ride back was pretty fiery. We were,
Well, Richard and I were privileged to watch your first game on Sunday, and there was nothing missing. It was not, excuse me, I'm terribly sorry I've tackled you, or would you like to get up and play the ball quickly? It was fiery. There was some great rugby played, and without that element, I'm guessing you wouldn't be here.
No, I mean, we haven't had that. I haven't had that in my life. I haven't been involved in competitive sport, and this is huge for me personally and for the guys. And when we're out there and we're playing, you are fiery. You are in the moment. You don't want to let that guy get by you. So the game was 60 minutes, but the reliving the game afterwards for the whole rest of the evening was 4 or 5 hours going over. I should have done this. I should have been in the corner there. Or next time we're going to have to make that handoff a lot faster because we do want to do better. We do want to learn from this, and we want to be successful. It ends scoreless, but you really knew who was the better in certain parts.
and by 4 or 5 hours, it's really been 3 days.
yeah. Our chat is just going wild.
It's just not. It's nonstop. But
Yeah.
And it was a tremendous learning experience playing in that game for the majority of us. It's our first competitive Masters rugby league
And
game.
you were up against a lot of experienced players, so
Yeah, I noticed that one.
there was no quarter given or taken by the opposition. They had some lovely stories, dads and lads, you know, an 80-year-old guy playing with his 56-year-old son. There were grandchildren watching their grandfathers play. But most of the guys you were playing against were significant players at community level, if not some who would play professionally. That must have been a thrill for you.
Yeah, well,
It really
definitely.
was.
Being a dads and lads game, you got to figure the lads had been in rugby league for their entire lives because their dads would have been in, and until 2 years ago, I would have been more of a hockey player than a rugby player. Growing up, it was hockey in the summer, hockey in the winter, and softball or baseball in the summer. Bit of soccer thrown in, and rugby was something that happened for a very small community. And again, it was mostly rugby union from the area where I am. And going in through high school, we had a rugby team, which was union. And, we finished undefeated as well because we couldn't find any opponents to play. But, undefeated is undefeated.
Yeah,
There
take
you
it.
go.
Yeah. So then when the Masters came around, I jumped at the opportunity, having had experience to NRL and Super League through my family, and being out there on the pitch. We had inter-squad games and things, but it was one of my buddies running at me, and now there was somebody who was really running at me, running past me, over me, if that was going to happen. There were some legitimate hits in that game. There was a lot of legitimate hits in that game.
Somebody needs to tell Bob Jowett that when he's been tagged, he needs to stop running.
They didn't get his
I
tags.
think Bob's argument was nobody was able to take those tags off of there.
Well, the referee actually pulled him aside and said, how hard are those tags on? He actually pulled them off and put them on his own shorts. He's like, all right, well, those are within the rules because they weren't coming off.
Actually, they switched up his tags partway through the game.
Did they now?
Yeah, he got a nice silky smooth tag thrown on there.
We should say Bob's originally from Bradford, so he was the guy in your team that had a little bit of experience.
Well, and
Yeah.
Bob is fundamental to the start of a lot of this because he's now currently the president of Canada Rugby League Association. He wasn't when 2017 was around, when the Wolfpack started play, and it was him that reached out to me. Actually, he saw me on social media asking questions, and he's like, oh, we live in the same city. We're about an hour north of Toronto. And he said, I've got 4 tickets. You could take your family down to a match. And since then, he and everybody here around this table have taken on more roles, bit by bit. So as you get involved in rugby league, something might come up. Could you help with this? Could you help with that? And people step up and they do it. And this is one of the things that we really love about this sport is that once you're in it, you have such a good time doing it. And the people we're with are such great people that you want to do more. And maybe it's one small thing here, but that small thing wouldn't have been done if you hadn't done it.
Yeah, I think also one thing that came across to us on a weekend where we had the great good fortune to watch a fantastic wheelchair game, a test match between England and France on Saturday night, is that we can talk all we like about being inclusive, but there are two examples of how it actually works, and I'm not sure how many other sports could do that, that whatever age you are, whatever ability or disability you may have, whatever gender you might be, there is a rugby league element that you can join in with, you can play or support. I would assume that that's pretty new to you and why you became involved.
Definitely. One awesome point about that was prior to our game was the Masters League women were playing. And so we're standing in the stands watching and cheering with the kids. And some of us were actually, one of the little children was yelling, "Mommy, Mommy," and then we're cheering, "Mommy, Mommy," cheering on the ladies. So that was great to see.
Yeah, that's good.
There was a woman out there on the pitch, and I believe she was what color shorts was she?
She was green.
Yeah, so
yeah.
she was in her 70s and she was out there playing. That's fantastic,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
For us to get the sport recognized officially in Canada, there's a number of boxes we have to check. It has to be played in a certain number of provinces. It has to be played by men and women. It has to be played by children. And these are set out by Sport Canada, too.
Minimum 5 provinces, I think.
Right, minimum 5 provinces, and it also must include sport for all. So past your competitive days in your 20s and 30s, there must be something for older players to keep people engaged. And it might not be necessarily just the physical side of the sport. It's also the social, the emotional, the mental health support. So we like to think we're a small part of that. And then if the Triple CRL gets off the ground and gets running, they've got a plan. There's your 5 provinces. There's the men and the women's game as well. If the Toronto Wolfpack, the reconstituted Toronto Wolfpack, continues on with this new NARL, North American Rugby League, there we have a professional side. So all these groups working hopefully loosely together.
This is rugby league. You'll get the picture. It won't take long.
Then combined, we could do some great things for the sport overall. And yeah, it's long-term goals, but we have to have long-term goals. If you expect a quick victory, it's not going to happen.
Everything's very much grassroots, right? For us, so we see the kind of feet on the ground because there's just not it's interesting. Like we see teams here that play weekly against other teams. We play weekly at home against ourselves because there's nothing available. And so it's a lot of times we're trying to play whatever competitive match we can against teams that are available. And so it's a bit of a challenge. COVID made it more challenging just because it would have been nice to have, teams coming over or up from the US, but
Yeah, one of our captains had a few games scheduled. There was going to be a policeman side, I believe, coming from Bradford. Excuse me, but there was a couple of teams that were going to come up from the States, the Atlantic Reapers, the Mid-Atlantic Reapers. It's a team from Jacksonville that were all going to come, but without the certainty of borders, you can't plan a tour. And you're not going just for a day for a match. So we don't have any airline sponsors yet, but when you come up for a tour, you got to be sure that it's going to happen. And it's been a bit rough to try and plan, or having planned things only to see the border restrictions and things change your plans again and again and again. As we've seen in planning this tour, we were booked with 2 different airlines before we eventually acquiesced and said, okay, let's go Air Canada.
fine, we'll settle on there.
How much of a hassle has it been then getting over here? Because I don't go anywhere, so I'm just stuck.
So since we've landed, it's been phenomenal. But getting here, even just trying to organize the finances has been a nightmare because you need 3 tests, and then you need 2 tests, and then you might not need any tests, but then you need 2 tests. Maybe no 3, nope, but then you need 2 different kinds of tests at different points. And so to budget even for that, I mean, we were looking at one point it was going to be about $800 or about 450 pounds to pay just for your COVID tests. And for some people who are at the upper limit of their budgeting, that could be a deal breaker. Luckily, we've got some amazing sponsorship, but if we're talking about the difficulties that planning it it's been difficult, because not a lot of people are flying. So the less national airlines that we had initially booked with had said, okay, we've got your flights. We had receipts in hand, and then they said, okay, you can fly, but we're going to change your dates. And we're not over here to see grandma. We can't just change our dates. We've got things booked and venues that have accommodated us. So we had to, chase after refunds from them, which were within 30 days we'll refund you. But we've already spent the tour's money, and we can't go out and just buy another, £4,000 worth of airline tickets.
No wonder the Australians didn't come over. It's a lot of hassle. They've
Yeah.
got further to come.
Well, we were blessed, and I think it's Nick went and sort of expressed that. We've got so many gents that play with us that are originally from here. So you've got, and this again speaks to the community and the family support. Mm-hmm. So we've got to come over here, day 2 tests. We had that shipped over to a family member of one of our players, and then we went and drove there, picked those up, all did the tests. We've got a test, 72 hours before going back to Canada. Mm-hmm. That went to another player's house. It's been quite the experience.
But you've shown it can be done. I think it'd be useful to get a bit of background on each of you while you're here. How you got into rugby league in the first place, maybe where you're from in Canada, because we assume, Canada, you all live next door to each other. Just because Rich and I are at 2 cities apart.
Toronto's there, Montreal, and then all the other bits, and then there's the bit on the west, and then that's it.
So I don't know what order you want to do it, but I think it would benefit us all if we knew a little bit more about you.
Sure, no, absolutely. My background is played union in high school, like the majority of the Canadian kids. Got out of the game for quite some time. Toronto Wolfpack came around, and Nicholas Mew actually sent out a request to people, seeing if anybody was interested in playing Masters. And having watched, before I get into that, Toronto Wolfpack was literally my first interaction into rugby league, and immediately loved the game. I thought the pace, hard hitting, I thought it was fantastic. So when Nicholas put out that call, signed up right away, and that was my first introduction. So that was two and a half years ago for the Ontario Greybeards, and been sticking with it since. So I am from Toronto, and right here, and Greybeards. And so absolutely love it, and can't wait to continue my Masters Rugby League career, and keep touring, and hopefully visiting any of the countries of anybody that's watching here. And anybody who is watching, feel free to come over to Canada and play us as well. We definitely want to have everybody there.
Jarrett's our big hoss on the team.
He's also been crucial in recruiting. There's a number of players who play for us now.
Who's going to turn him down? He knocks on your door, you're going to play him. It's the biggest scrum half I've ever seen.
Right on. So I'm Mike. I'm from just outside of Toronto, a little happy little place called Orangeville. I have some family in Australia that I've been fortunate to visit a couple of times growing up, and in '95 I went over and visited family in Canberra just after the Raiders had won their grand final, and it was very unexpected, and I was there shortly afterwards, and the VHS tape had just become available, so I got to watch that. And God, that sound makes me sound old. But it was I had never seen the game before, and heard about it a lot, but just seeing the electric atmosphere of it and the way that their eyes lit up when they talked about it, I thought this has got to be something special. So I watched a lot of it. When it became possible to see it sort of on satellite and things like that, I used to watch it whenever I could. When I was in high school, I played a little bit of rugby. It was not a terribly long career. But then I had a year as a teaching exchange program. I lived in Australia for a year and lived on the Gold Coast and got to see the Titans every one of their games. That was a home game. Again, not tremendously successful. They happened to win the Wooden Spoon that year, which I remember the captain of the team went up and said, "I'll use it to stir me porridge," and everyone kind of went, "Huh." But just getting out there and getting more involved in the sport. I played touch rugby league at the time, and I thought this is something I really want to get into. But of course, coming back to Canada after that year, I had no avenue for it. And then, so fast forward about 6 years later, I thought I was still keeping tabs on the NRL, trying to find out more and more about Super League. And I thought, whatever happened to that guy, Fui Moi Moi? That guy was just a dynamite player. And so I Googled his name, and it says he's just signed with Toronto. And I knew that there was a Toronto somewhere in New South Wales. So I thought, I didn't know they had a team. So I clicked on the article and I went, oh my God, that's my Toronto. My Toronto has a team. And I instantly bought season tickets and had been to every home game, bar a couple for weddings and things. And that was it. I was hooked. So when the Greybeards had started up, I got in as soon as I could. We had a meeting underneath the tree. We figured out that it was something that had enough interest and enough momentum, and we got her going.
Yeah.
That famous Brampton rugby tree.
That tree,
Yeah,
man.
tree.
Yeah.
I've taken an interesting path. I actually didn't come from playing any rugby as a kid. It just wasn't really anything that was available. I grew up playing baseball my whole life. And Jared and I have been pals since we were teenagers. So Jared came over to me and he was like, hey pal, there's a sport. I love to run, so there's a sport that I really think you'd love to play. Why don't you come out? And that's that same tree that we all kind of met under, and I fell in love with it. Like it is such a wonderful sport, super inclusive, and it brings that element for me of speed, with the aggression of the hitting, fell in love with it. Really enjoyed it, and obviously super honored to be selected to play for Canada.
I've told my story a number of times, and too often. I think people might have heard it because I talk about it all the time. It's pretty much the only topic of conversation that I have now. Growing up, I did not play sport. I played the piano. I collected coins. I did everything in the house. The great outdoors was wonderful to look at through the front window. But then, this came along, and very long story short, I became very, very passionate about this. The tree, this legendary tree that we're all talking about. If you go to Google Maps and you type in Ontario Greybeards, you'll find where our headquarters is. It's in Brampton, Ontario, and there's a rugby union clubhouse there, and somehow we've managed to take over their spot on Google Maps. So it's Ontario Greybeards.
It's happening, Phil. That's
expansion. That's expansion.
So it's at the CAA, the Canadian Automobile Association Centre in Brampton, and all these guys, we come from roughly an hour from every direction to come to this clubhouse. So I'm an hour north up in Barrie. And then there's others who come from places called Whitby or Oshawa or in the Guelph area, Burlington, Hamilton, Ancaster. And so we'll drive an hour just to get to our practices on a Sunday to play each other and hopefully as many opponents as we can, because it means so much to us, And when we decided to form as a club, like our first time playing, we weren't an official club. It was just a group of guys who got together under the banner of the Ontario Greybeards, and many, many thanks to my wife for coming up with the name. No idea where she got it from. But,
Hold on a sec. Say that again.
I'm in Greybeards. Greybeards is so good.
So we met under this tree, and we said, okay, are we going to go forward with this? What are we going to do? How are we going to arrange this? Are we going to operate out of this clubhouse? What do we need to do? And so there was a long process of trying to incorporate, trying to register as a nonprofit, because that opens up a lot of doors as well in terms of sponsorship. And everybody was like, you know what, this is great. Let's make a commitment. We'll do this. And people started taking on different jobs, and we've gone on from there. So we had an English team come over, and this sort of forced the creation of the club, because they were a masters club based in London. But they weren't officially based in London in the sense that players came from all across the UK. It was whoever could afford the time and the cost to come over. And so they sent a message over to Canada and said, hey, we've got a masters club. Do you have an opponent we could play? And so this went through several hands until it came to me, and somebody said, would you organize a team? And not knowing what I was in for, I said, sure. And that's when I reached out. And it was actually pretty amazing. Within the space of, I'd say 2 weeks, I had 30 to 40 people reach out to me and say, yeah, I'll play. Not every one of those came through. And some said, well, I'll commit to play one game, but I can't commit to play two. I don't know. And then when we actually played the first game, a number of the guys who were in that game but didn't commit to the second said, I'm playing the second now too, right? And we were like, well, we don't have a jersey for you, because we were using different kit. I don't care. I'll borrow somebody else's. When they come off, we'll just swap jerseys. because they loved it so much. Like instantly, when you're on the pitch and you're running around with all those guys and you're playing, you can't help but love this sport. And as I said, I was never sporty or physical. I mean, I played some hockey, but I played goalie largely because I'm beautiful. And I needed the equipment to protect this gorgeousness.
He played without a mask. That helped.
But in any case, it's an addictive, in a wonderful addictive kind of way, where when you do this, you want to do more of it, and so this has grown from there. And we've incorporated as a nonprofit, registered as a nonprofit rather, and we've even got more plans in future. Now, Mike can talk about this because there is a potential festival or tournament that's going to happen in July of next year, and we're hoping to see a British club come over and play us on Canada Day. Lots of Canadian fireworks, lots of celebration, play a festival, help introduce the sport to other people. While you're over, perhaps head across the border for July the 4th and see their lesser but interesting fireworks.
Yeah, so there's a town about an hour west of Toronto called Guelph, and they have a Masters Festival that's been pretty successful, and it's Masters of all sports. So they've got this large park called Exhibition Park, and they've got Masters softball. They've got a proper rugby pitch and a football field. They've got a track and all sorts of things. So they have in the past had Masters for lots of different sports. And we connected with them to do something for Rugby League. And initially they were asking, do you think you can get 4 or 5 guys to come out and do a try rugby kind of thing? And I said, I think we can do a little bit better than that. We can at least get an intra-squad game, and if we can convince people to line up that timing, it would be an amazing time to come and see all that Ontario has to offer. If you're going to be touring around Canada, this would be a great spot to make it. So we're in very initial talks to reach out to our UK counterparts and see if tours can come through at that point, as well as the teams that I'd mentioned before from the States. If they're able to travel, it works really well. The Friday is our holiday, the Monday is their holiday. So the town of Guelph has worked with these organizers. They've got huge funding for the fireworks to do part of their Canada Day celebrations and things. The whole park will have its liquor license taken care of there, so that's a huge bit of organizing taken off our backs, and it's just a fantastic opportunity. So we can see lots and lots of opportunities for growth. We've got a proven track record of when we're able to put on an event, even just as the Greybeards have started. We've got a lot of sponsorship that has been directed towards sort of our own marketing. We've got some feather banners and some A-frames and things. So when we put out a game, an intra-squad game, it looked pretty swish. We had, Nick was mentioning a couple of the guys who had just come to see us for the first time in July, and I don't have to tell you guys that Rugby League is the greatest game. There's, as a sport, it's phenomenal. There's room for everybody. It's fast. It's clever. It's hard hitting if you want it to be. Masters is every bit as you want it to be, as inclusive. So we've had these guys join us up right away. Like there are people who there's a guy who comes from Saskatchewan, which is if you were to drive, it would be about 24 hours.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 3-day trip, right?
Yeah, he does not drive.
But he'll fly in. He'll fly in. Like we've had him. Well, I mean, he's with us, but he on the tour, but flew in weekly for several weeks, several practices in a row, right?
He has a connection with Air Canada, so he gets discounted.
Yeah, I mean, he's the president of Air Canada.
He's an air hostess.
Yeah. But he would literally fly in from Saskatchewan to come to Toronto. So what is that, a 2-hour flight from Saskatchewan?
Longer than that,
Longer.
4 hours. But that's just a level of commitment, right? Like that people are willing to sort of give to the sport. You kind of fall in love
So
with
if you are unwilling to drive 20 minutes down the road, one of our guys flies 4 hours just to come to practices to play us.
League One clubs, you've got no excuse now not to go to corners.
Actually, on Halloween weekend, he wanted to make the deal to keep peace at home so that he could take the kids with him. He drove 8 hours to Winnipeg, and for 5:30 in the morning flew to Toronto, practiced and played a game with us, flew back directly afterwards, picked up his kids, went out trick-or-treating, and then drove 8 hours back to...
Now, if that's not love for his sport, what is?
Yeah. As long as Greta Thunberg's not watching this, I think we're okay. I'm intrigued about sporting schools in Canada because over here, obviously, well, in West Yorkshire, that's all I can speak of. football, soccer, rugby league, hockey, not ice hockey, obviously, we don't have a rink at school. Cricket in the summer for about 2 weeks until everyone gets bored of it. Athletics. You've all mentioned rugby, which I know it's the other one, it's the only one in many parts of the world, but I'm for some reason I'm surprised at that. I thought Canada would just be ice hockey and that's it. You need to do obviously baseball, but I'm surprised.
It's we're super diverse, right?
Mhm.
So, and a lot of that growth has been driven through professional sports coming in. So baseball took off. Not that there wasn't grassroots baseball going on, but that growth of the Toronto Blue Jays, 92, 93 World Series, basketball in Toronto specifically, and now Canada has become huge, starting with Vince Carter, and then just expanding. And basketball works well for, inner city play where you've got, sports facilities, relatively inexpensive game to play. Hockey's huge, but again, hockey doesn't work for all demographics. It's an expensive game to play to put your kids through hockey, whereas games like, rugby, basketball, soccer's, or football, sorry.
No, you're allowed to call it soccer because it is an English word. It is an English word.
There's a big minor system in Canada, and again, you see the growth of some of the football players that are over here in Davies, and it's just the groundswell. They just had 50,000 fans in Edmonton to have our national team play Costa Rica. So it was.
Did most of them end up on the pitch trying to streak or something?
That happens.
Or was that the other? It was all over the social media this week. Some Canadians running on the pitch. I don't know.
Doon's here, so
We've eliminated that. We've eliminated that, but I wouldn't doubt it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. The other thing too is football, the Canadian football. There's been, as time has gone on, there's been more and more that have gone down to play NFL in the college ranks, but also in the Canadian Football League as well. It's that game is.
Canadian football's got 100+ years of
Yeah.
history. Difficult to compete on a sort of global basis with the massive NFL, but it's got Toronto. It's got its following of fans, but it's huge. Like it's huge in Saskatchewan,
Alberta.
Alberta. Like there's just because that's a big portion of their sports there, right?
Canadian football is our kindred sport. I've said this on the program before, but we just don't realise.
Well, it's
because
the
we
same-
don't know about it.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's a fast-paced game. You've got 3 downs versus 4 downs, so you got to move that ball, and it's a beautiful sport. Like I think all of us have kind of followed that closely over the years too. So
if you take a look at the original Grey Cup trophy, if you go back far enough, the Grey Cup trophy, which is for the Canadian Football League, which is a version of gridiron, actually was originally a rugby league trophy. And it actually says on the original trophy that that's what it was for. And then it morphed into Canadian football. So there's definitely a connection there going back far enough. But we have so many different sports, and in Canada you don't have to choose a sport. Doon is at a lot of Toronto Argonauts CFL games. Martin Simpson is a season ticket holder at Toronto FC. Pretty much at some point in time, all of us have been to a Jays game or a Raptors game or continue to go to those. And that's fine. And then the sports will actually support each other. They'll cross-promote. So,
that's because they're all owned by the same.
but they'll congratulate each other, and they will say, hey, you did this. Congratulations from the Toronto Blue Jays. Congratulations from the Toronto.
Yeah,
Maple
very
Leafs.
very
Yeah,
supportive.
see that on
I'm
social
same.
media.
We're all the same. I'm
Yeah.
a Jays season ticket holder. Leafs, Raptors.
Yeah.
I was a TFC for a while. Like it's a bit of a sporting community there versus so much of the competition, I think, between the two. Maple Leafs are obviously, that's a big personality within the sporting world in Toronto. But a lot of those teams have really created a community around themselves, and that's, we kind of look at rugby league and sort of hope to create that same community there.
I'm not a big hockey expert anymore, but for the people watching, Toronto are like Warrington.
Promise a lot.
Promise a lot.
Maple Leafs. It's not all the
I'm a huge Leafs fan. Jared
I am
is
not.
not, and so the
I'm loving
crap
this
talking
here.
that I get because we can't ever close the deal is we've lost. We've had such great teams, and for 5 years in a row, have lost
Yeah.
in the first round of the playoffs every single
That
year.
is Warrington.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. You see.
So the elephant in the room, which you've all sort of mentioned,
Beyond Jared, we mean the one.
Come on.
Oh man, harsh.
Trouble King. I feel as I should be saying seconds out. Is the Wolfpack, because clearly it was a driver to get you all together, to get you all involved, to have something to support. You've mentioned that clearly, as professional sport makes a mark, it elevates in the country itself. Firstly, the obvious question: how disappointed were you that it didn't work out? What could it have been? And we've discussed it a lot on the show about what we thought it could be from 6,000 or 7,000 miles away. We've written some stuff and been pretty disappointed that it wasn't given more chance to breathe, given some of the exceptional circumstances at the end. But we loved watching the journey. We saw the potential. The North American market is key to this sport ever being anything.
The North
other
American
than-
market doesn't exist, Phil.
Yeah,
I've
to
seen a
some,
report.
to some. Well, let's not get to that. But we don't know it from your point of view. So we can lament the fact that we never got the chance to come out to Canada and enjoy your company over there. We can see what clubs like Hull KR are doing now that they've got your match day experience and have taken that on board. I think we would have loved to have welcomed Toronto to play our clubs over here so that you could get a feel for that 126-year-old culture. But what was it like for you?
To see it not continue as it had been was absolutely crushing. And then we had a little bit of hope with the potential revival that was turned down with that. You know how the story went. It was really, really, really hard. It was hard to go through because I had, like everybody here, we'd seen it from the beginning. We saw it grow from the very first match where it was, I think, 11 degrees and snowing and raining sideways, and we still had 6,000 people there. And then by the time we had the £1 million game that ended 2019, there was almost 10,000 people there, and it was
More.
it was more.
Yeah, there was more.
Yeah,
There was more.
Good.
Stadium holds 9. I was told 12.
Yeah.
And because they just packed it, they absolutely packed it.
The end zones, the beer gardens, the standing room only. It was just such an electric atmosphere. I was, making a day of it. And after that £1 million game, I was walking around the stadium or walking back to my car, back to transit and things. And 3 hours after the game, you would just look at somebody and go, Super League! and then the person would answer, Super League! And it was electric. It was a real atmosphere. It was catching on. There was talk of them being picked up by a television like a proper television network. CBC had been fantastic for the first 3 years covering the games so that we could watch them even when they were here in the UK. But it was devastating to see that it wasn't going to continue as it was, and then to have the curtain pulled back and see a lot of the things that really could have been done better. And having that in most of the media overshadowing the awesome things that were accomplished has been really devastating to see as well, because so many things happened right to make it as successful as it was. And for all the naysayers out there to have the ammunition to say, oh, obviously it's not great that people weren't paid. It's obviously not great that some things weren't taken into account, that a lot of risks were taken that didn't pay off in terms of not having a practice squad and things like that couldn't be afforded. But to think that you had a team that played as a Toronto-based team and had to reorganize the schedule so that they didn't have home games in February and March when the ground was frozen. And all of these obstacles were conquered because the end goal was to see that this awesome potential was there. And for the most part, while it was alive, those things were realized. We had amazing fans. Every friend and family member that I brought to the matches loved it, loved the experience, loved the product on the field, and were hooked. And Super League, our season, if not for COVID, would have been phenomenal. We've quickly grown out of Lamport Stadium.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize.
No,
that's great.
not at all.
That's great.
Jump in. I mean, it must have been a different experience for all of you, but it's just useful, I think, for us over here who championed what Toronto could bring to the sport. But the morning you read in the paper that there wasn't going to be a team anymore, or the hopes and dreams you'd had of Wigan coming over and St Helens, and middle of our summer, loads of those visitors to Niagara Falls. I know from speaking to people at Leeds, for example, they had over 1,000 people booked to come over in August of that first season, and there were plans in Toronto of how they were going to be entertained, and we were disappointed that we couldn't do that. Yeah. But what was it like when the morning you realised that you weren't going to be able to go to Lamport and watch professional rugby league anymore?
No, as Steer said, I felt it crushing as a day one season ticket holder, and being there, watching it grow and build and spreading that word, and then having that taken away from you was.
And what could it have been,
junk,
do you reckon?
really.
I mean, clearly we're not talking about the way David Argyle ran his business, because we're not privy to all of that, and there clearly were some errors that have been rightly exposed. But what could it have been, do you reckon? I mean, had you had that? There is a case for saying that when COVID hit, the obvious thing to do was play with 11 teams that year, give Toronto the year off to not only reevaluate what they were as a club and going forward, new investment, but also just take that travel element out of it. But let's assume we hadn't had COVID and that season had gone on, you'd played 5 games, you're going to play the rest of the season. What could it have been, do you reckon?
Could have been magical. Really could have been magical. Think of the growth that we had in those stands in those first couple of years, getting to the peak of 12, whatever. I fully think that we probably at some point, whether or not they would have wanted to, transition over to the football stadium, BMO Field, have crowds of 15 to 20,000 cheering us on, cheering the Wolfpack on, and having that game day experience, so more and more people could experience that.
And I fully think that had the Super League clubs been able to come over to Toronto and bring their fans over, if it had been taken to a vote at any point in time after that, those directors and those clubs would have changed their vote. If Toronto had won in the £1 million game against London and gone up and played a season of Super League, it would have been completely different. Because again, people would have come over, they could have seen it firsthand, because they're going on word of mouth, rumor, speculation. Someone says something as an idea, as a rumor that they have created. Someone else picks that up as truth, and it's not. And yet they didn't see it firsthand. And so I remember reading about one particular Super League chairman, and he said, no one could tell me what Toronto would bring to the game. Nobody could tell me how this would benefit our club. But the reality is, he wasn't asking anybody who could answer those questions. This was his way of, virtue signaling, where you make a statement like that as though you really are seeking information, but you're not. So when you saw that report, which it still rankles with me because it was utterly ridiculous, when they were assessing Toronto as, we do not see the Toronto sporting market as viable, or there's no room in the Toronto sporting market, and yet they did not speak to one sporting professional or marketing body or sports team in Canada. That would be like you coming to me and saying, hey, do you think we should put a team in Nottingham? I've never been to Nottingham. I don't know anything about it. And if I don't talk to somebody there, how am I going to tell you what it's like? But they were judging it from thousands of miles away, having never been there, which was just utterly ridiculous. And any of these guys, any of us could tell you, Toronto as a sporting market is huge. It's absolutely huge. It's not just the city of Toronto. You're looking at roughly 9 to 10 million people within driving distance who go to Toronto to see games in all different sports. So that in itself was just utterly ridiculous.
It's tough to make the argument that the third largest city in North America couldn't support, you had an entry point for the sport into North America. It just kind of blows my mind that you'd want to, it really seemed like just a carpet being pulled, right? It's like, set it up, set the table, and then you just pull the tablecloth, and you're like, see, we knew it would never work. It's like, you didn't let people sit at the table long enough.
For it to work, did there need to be a plan to have more North American teams? Because Toronto, isolated on its own, was always going to be a difficult ask, however successful they'd been. And I think success is measured in different ways. And I use Hull KR as the example earlier, because clearly they were one of the few teams that did go to Toronto, that did get a feel for that game day experience. And it came back imbued, and they thought, well, how do we now maybe sell that to a whole public? So it'll be slightly different. But it's more than just the 80 minutes. That is a pure Toronto thing. That's a legacy of having visited. But how long could we have gone on with, for example, the Catalan experience until we see that change next year with Toulouse coming in? Was part of the issue that to just do it in one place in North America was always going to be the toughest way to start?
Well, it is. I mean, it's got to be challenging, right? Just from the travel perspective, right? Like, you know, the sheer economics of sports, right? You know, you've got going overseas for a period of time and having to house there. That's challenging. But the groundswell, it's interesting because I kind of looked at it like, hey, this is a great kickoff point to then say, okay, we're going to add 2 more teams here. Maybe you've got a New York-based team. Maybe you've got like in
that feeds into TV contracts. So Toronto on its own is not necessarily going to get a TV contract. So when critics would say, well, Toronto's in and they said they do this, but they don't have a TV contract yet. Well, one city's not going to do it.
Which is exactly what they said to Catalan, and
yeah,
it's taken 16 years to get Toulouse in. So.
and yeah, you'd need another club. So whether that be in Ottawa or in, you know, New York City or Montreal or something like that, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, any of those coming in would have then got some network interest and some network support, and it would have gradually grown from there. But Toronto on its own, I'm not going to say it's not sustainable, because every match day, the shop at Lamport Stadium did $30,000 worth of business. So they sold that much in kit and merchandise and all the rest of it. So those free tickets and those cardboard fans
We're all surprised you're actually 3-dimensional people.
Yeah.
That's the real surprise.
So they were you know, doing $30,000 worth of business in the shop, plus the team got a cut of all the food and drink sales within the stadium. Yes, financially there's a lot going on behind the scenes that was, you know, terrible, but there was so much there that could have happened. Perhaps if the rugby league clubs that were coming over were in a better financial position such that Toronto didn't have to pay for their flights and for all their accommodations, didn't have to carry them, Toronto themselves, could have lasted longer. And you know, with the whole costing thing, when you are then told, let's say a league, Centurions for example, you can join our league, you can come up to Super League, but you're not going to get the same amount of money as everybody else. It's clear that you are handcuffing the other teams coming up in order to protect what's already there. Yeah. So the way expansion...
But if you'd have got half, that would have been great, rather than paying for everything you said. I think the other side of that coin is that there genuinely seems to be a willingness under Troy Grant, the chairman of the IRL, to promote the idea that America and Canada should have the 2029 World Cup. That clearly the plan was after the Denver test, which actually, when you look at the attendance figures, was one of the highest attendances for an England and New Zealand game anywhere, and it just happened to be in Colorado. But he seems to be moving this agenda whereby the World Cup should next go to France, which is great, capitalising on a lot of good things happening there. But 2029, we really should be thinking about taking it to where it was originally going to be in 2025. Now, again, to do that, you don't start in 2028. You sort of start that now. You come to guys like yourselves and say, what's happening on the ground? What could you do over the next 7 years to make sure that if we did bring a World Cup here, there'd be a groundswell of not only fans in the stadium, but maybe could we play the greybeards as a curtain raiser? And what would the Canadian national team be like by then? Because it'd be nice to have them in the actually in the tournament, not in a qualifying one where they might get knocked out. If that will is genuine, and if somebody came to you, Quartet, today and said, we are seriously thinking of doing that in a very un-rugby league way, we're going to plan in advance.
Right.
Would you be encouraging them not only to do that, but would you be able to say there is definitely a market for that? And if the one thing that comes out of the Wolfpack is that we've got a World Cup in 2029, that's something we can all really build towards and look forward to?
I wouldn't even say you need an identifiable and existing market right now. If you've got enough lead time, you create the market. You know, with promotions and with advertising and all the rest of it, you can create the market.
And I think it depends on what you want to get out of the World Cup. Why are we having a World Cup? Are we just trying to see which team wins the tournament, or are we trying to showcase this amazing sport with these amazing experiences? If you're trying to showcase it, then you don't keep it in the cities where it's existing right now and thriving right now. You want to put it out there and draw new people in and new markets in. Otherwise, you may as well just be happy with your championship final and your big day. But if you want to address new audiences and attract new audiences, then you say, look at this amazing thing. Here are the best of the best from each country, and let's have a go. We could get the Canada Wolverines, who I'm sure would be happy to be in there. The Canada Ravens would be very, very excited to be in there. It was gut-wrenching to see things canceled for the Ravens this year. The ladies were ready to rock, and we were ready to be in the stands cheering them on. And but if you're going to, if there is a chance of North America hosting that in 2029, I my personal guarantee as as whatever weight I can carry, would be that it would be successful. I mean, the Wolfpack experience has shown that there's an appetite for a great game. If it's marketed well, if we can get some attention to what's happening in NRL and Super League, then people will see the game ahead of time. If we can, do our jobs as ambassadors through the Ontario Greybeards, through the Grizzlies, we've got a lot of attention now, even just within our own communities and social circles, about what the Grizzlies are doing, having come over here. Everything we do just adds more and more legitimacy to it. And the more you talk about it, the more it gets talked about, and it grows. I mean,
It's kind of unfortunate that the guys on the team, all the guys on the team, are actually so remarkably humble, because we need them to be out there and to be loud and to spread the word even more. But they're such a nice, all the guys are just so nice and so friendly and so helpful. And one-on-one, they're fantastic. To have these guys here is absolutely fantastic for them to be speaking about it, because normally we speak in small groups. Would we be willing to take on bigger roles for the idea of getting a Rugby League World Cup in North America? I believe we would. I definitely
And
believe
I
we
think
would.
that's the crucial bit, because you both mentioned marketing. Marketing has a cost. Rugby League doesn't have the money to market properly. But to have people already on the ground that can act as your ambassadors, that can be given a banner to, sell to every time you're talking to potential sponsors or audiences or television executives, that we got a World Cup coming. To me, that's the free marketing that we need to be doing now. And I don't think the game realises we've got people like you to act as ambassadors. And to a lot of people it was, we had Toronto, it didn't work, it's finished.
Right.
And that's why it was so important to try and get you on here to explain that you've got the evangelical spirit that we had 126 years ago. We've become naturally cynical about everything, because that's rugby league. That's partly in our DNA. But the more we can link with people like yourselves who are imbued with just coming across it and so enthusiastic about, you called it the greatest game amongst you about 3 or 4 times, we haven't. We take that probably for granted.
Okay.
So I just think that the game needs to keep in touch with you guys, and if they're serious about a World Cup, and if the only thing that ever came out of the Wolfpack was 7 or 8 years down the line, we staged the most lucrative and successful World Cup ever, and it was thanks to you guys being on the ground to help deliver it, then it's been worthwhile.
But I think make no mistake about it, you've got people in Canada that picked up the game and learnt about the game and fell in love with the game. But we've got players on our team from Australia, and we've got players on our team, from the UK, all over the place. It's Steve is from South Africa, Zimbabwe.
Right.
You've got a number of people that just have that history with the game, that are all over Canada, that love the game all over Canada, and that frankly love the game all over North America. It's just you need build it and they will come. It's already there. You just have to nurture that.
And we haven't died as a sport, nor did we not exist prior to the Wolfpack. So now granted, I wasn't involved in it, but there was still rugby league happening in Canada, and there were still people working hard behind the scenes, very involved with it. The Wolfpack did bring a spotlight on, and it did bring a lot of growth, a lot more attention. But then when that ended, the rest of it didn't die. And so the people who say, well, that's it, the Wolfpack's over, I guess the rugby league experiment in Canada's done. No, we're still here. And those who were doing the amateur game, they're still here. In the national body, it's still here. And it was there all along. And so when I'd read critics say, well, there's no grassroots in Canada, the Wolfpack aren't doing this and they aren't doing that. No, others were though. And so there was grassroots going on, and there still is. So for those who think that it's all gone, please don't forget us. We're still here.
Absolutely, the Brantford Broncos. You got the Haldeman club that's there,
Yeah.
and that's just within the Toronto area. I mean, there's a lot more activity in Vancouver on our west coast because of ties to Australia, New Zealand, and
we would love to see a Masters team in British Columbia, and I was really hoping that more players from BC would apply to come to come on this tour. But again, COVID, costs, timing. There's so much more involved for them to come out. But if they, you know, I really would love to be able for us to fly out west and play a game out in Vancouver against a Masters team out there, as well as the States.
Yeah, that was another opportunity that was crushed by COVID. There was supposed to be an East-West game between the men's side, the women's side, and the Masters. We're talking about going out as well, but it just couldn't happen because we didn't know what flight was going to be allowed and that sort of thing. But you know, there's always 2022, and we'll see what happens. We're coming for you, BC.
Oh, we love a rivalry.
Yeah,
States of origin.
Well, it's coming back.
Oh, would you imagine province of origin?
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
That would be something. Province of origin.
Yorkshire, Lancashire is coming back.
Let's hope not.
No.
The,
The problem is we've had that and failed, you see, and well, you mentioned Nottingham earlier. That's 30 years ago. We're not going back to Nottingham. That failed once. We can't go back.
let's take the bash.
I read something. It was an article, and it was posted on a Rugby League historians Facebook group, and it was a news piece, and it was from the I want to say the 1950s, and there was a club. Someone had said, let's get a rugby league club up in Edinburgh, and then the response from the rugby league authorities was, well, you haven't got grassroots there. Once you've got the grassroots in Edinburgh, then we'll consider getting a pro club up there. And I'm just like, my God, you missed a golden opportunity right there.
Oh, it's the history of the sport is of missed opportunity, going right back to the Northern Union days. We're talking about Cornwall. There was a Northern Union team in Plymouth, so yeah. It's not like we haven't done it before. We just haven't done it very well.
Sometimes the professional team has to come to build the grassroots,
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's just
but there isn't a one size fits all.
yeah.
No.
But I do think unless you've got grassroots, it's not going to be sustainable. And unless you're bringing the real top names and you're going to play in the top division, and you've got a backer that is prepared to put enough money in to let it survive for at least 5 years or 10 years, then the only way you can put a team into an area is with a lot of finance. And Melbourne have found that. If you're going to do it on the slightly cheaper model, you've got to have grassroots to build into, which is sort of what the Midlands Hurricanes are doing here at the moment. In terms of what may next happen in Canada, sort of at grassroots level, if you like, you seem to have two options. You've got the NARL, which may or may not happen for whatever reason, some of which is COVID related for sure, delayed, but not quite deliverable as was originally promised at the moment. May or may not involve the Wolfpack. Probably won't now involve the ACEs, but you've got the
Triple CRL,
which again seems to be sustainably trying to build something in that it didn't say we're doing it and we're doing it tomorrow. It said this is what we plan to do. In 18 months' time we'll launch it. It'll have men's, women's, presumably a masters element if they can incorporate that as well. How do you see it going, and what does it need to do to maintain your interest over the next few years to the point where maybe a professional team does come back into Canada?
My interest will be there. As long as I'm playing and as long as there's potential for me to get kids into the game, teach the sport in my school to young kids and say, here's a sport, because it's so affordable, it's so accessible to all. I will continue to be there, and I believe a lot of us feel the same way. There are kids in North America who, as you were talking about with the hockey, ice hockey is way too expensive for your ordinary working class kid, even middle class kids, to get involved in. Whereas rugby league, boots and a ball, and you're good. Tags, and that's all you would need. Our First Nations communities in North America, you would refer to them potentially as Indians, but First Nations, they don't have a lot of the wherewithal to have a great deal of sports offered that are not already there in terms of their cultural sports. I see rugby league as a potential huge area for them. They could pick this up and they would be very successful. And there are some teams. The Haldeman Wolfpack has got a First Nations component. Iroquois Roots Rugby, they as well. And they, in fact, at the inaugural Toronto Wolfpack, inaugural second version of the Toronto Wolfpack game, where they played the American team that came up. For some reason, the Wolfpack's jerseys weren't ready. They didn't get there because, as happens in rugby league, things go awry. Iroquois Roots Rugby lent the Wolfpack their kit, and so they played in this First Nations team's kit. So I see that as something. So as long as I've got hope, as long as I've got something that I can go towards, as long as I'm like, okay, here's an avenue we haven't gone down, let's try that, I'll still be there, and I believe the other guys will too.
Yeah, for sure. I think it would be handy if we can get, in terms of more tangible things, we need people. We need people who enjoy the sport to have the same fire and to listen to us, and we need guys like us to bring friends out and friends of friends, and it grows from there because we have a pretty good success rate of getting people out and then they're hooked.
Yep.
We need people who, like the expats who have been part of the Greybeards and the Grizzlies, who know about the game and can talk about the strategy of things and can set us where we need to be. We've got bigger bodies, we've got smaller, faster bodies, we've got all different kinds of ways to include different people with their skills and knowing where to put them and how to utilize each person. And then we need guys like these who just make it a very welcoming and amazing place to be, very inclusive, very supportive. We're never shouting at anybody. We're just helping them to get up for the next tackle, and we're good to go. I think it's a real recipe for success. And I was saying earlier that if we are able to put together a tour for next year when the proper World Cup happens, if the Grizzlies are back, if we've done our job, it's going to be a lot harder to be putting his jersey on again because there's going to be a lot more people vying for a spot on the roster. And a large part of what put us on the roster this year was the committee and the CRLA side committee that decided who was going to go. It was about contributions to rugby league. It wasn't necessarily the most skilled guys, but the people who are willing to dedicate their time and their energies and their positivity to growing the sport. And that's why most of us are on the team.
So you're part way through your tour. The big game are to come, the internationals.
That's right.
A, how excited are you? But B, will you go back as different people having experienced all of this, do you think?
I think so. I think, I'm not sure if you've seen any of our social media or where it was posted, but our first game the other day, we all hugged in the locker room and we sang "Oh Canada" together, which was an absolutely tear-jerking moment, right?
Yeah,
and
still
just
got the
the
goosebumps.
Yeah.
And when the internationals come, it's my understanding that we're going to be out there when the anthems are. We're going to share the field, share the pitch with everybody, and hear everybody's anthems. And how can that not change your life, right? As a kid growing up in Canada, you're always hoping to represent the country. You want to do them proud, and to be able to be on that pitch on Sunday and listen to that. There's no way I'm not gonna be able to cry. Like I'm gonna
absolutely.
and be a little blubbering.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it right now just thinking about it.
But then being able to channel that energy, go represent your country in the Maple Leaf, it's gonna be.
But I think just as important, we came here as a set of guys, and I kind of feel, through that dads and lads game and through the time we spend together, and this is what I talked about from the very beginning about that family feel about it. It's like these aren't just guys that you're playing with; these are family, brothers, and it's sort of a sport like no other. Because you really are, you're going out and leaving it all out on the field, which I just find to be so refreshing from that perspective. Like nothing is, hey, look at that play that I made. It's like,
We're in it together.
Success is team success. It's not a, it's not a singularly driven individual success, right?
And as part of the tour, even off of the field, the guys who have led our tour and picked the places where we're eating, the things that we're going, touring Headingley Stadium, heading to Haydock races and things like that. So I've brought my 16-year-old along on the trip, and I know he's going back as a different person. He's seen and heard some things on a rugby tour that...
Stay on tour.
Stay on tour.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing, that you're here obviously in the close season, but if you can come back for the World Cup next year and the games are going on, and maybe you could even see the odd Super League game or the Grand Final as part of your tour, I think you'll find that because it's so inclusive, that your enthusiasm and energy will be reciprocated. But we haven't fully been able to do that because there's no games going on. But it's all very well going around Headingley and saying this is great. I can see that in 1890 this was one of the original stadiums that was built, and all the history and the great players that have played here. But actually, if it's full and you can go to a game and you can be in an area afterwards where you can mix with the fans, it takes it to another level. So I'm hoping that you can come back and experience that, if nothing else.
Definitely. That was actually one of my favorite parts about, you mentioned mixing with the fans after the game, was that Toronto experience in the beer garden after the game, talking with the players, the family of the players.
Yeah.
and just getting that sense of how the game itself is building on our side. And
That long conversation you used to have with
Totally.
Brian McDermott.
Yeah.
Yeah, or talking with the refs and the match
Yeah.
crew. They come into the beer garden with the sets of fans of both teams, and we share a pint, and I talk to them about all kinds of things, because we need that in Canada too. We need match officials, we need trained refs. We've got some great ones there, but numerically, for the sport to grow, we need more.
Coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there's been so many guys behind the scenes for this tour who have taken on just some fantastic roles. That none of this would have happened without each individual person doing these various things. So the more bodies we have in, the better we have. You know, the better we have. Better footing we're on going forward.
Who's fallen off the ball, Phil? Who's fallen
I don't know. I was trying to do is sort of block them. I try to block the fall.
I can see him leaning in.
Oh, there's no.
All I heard was
this.
this.
Nothing
was
said
like-
on this program. Is it the
Oh,
same
it's
one?
Ryan Bailey.
Ryan Bailey.
Oh.
Sorry,
Oh.
Ryan. Our apologies.
Did he play for Toronto?
Sorry.
He did. He
That-
really did.
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah.
Here we go, pal. I'll just keep you right here.
That was a right bunch of Romans on that one, isn't it?
If I could just, and I'm going back to a previous point, because there's a lot of things that I think set up Toronto and any future club to fail in terms of expansion, is that I do not believe rugby league is expanding by simply changing a team at the top table. If you've got 12 clubs and you replace one with another, that is not expansion. If my wife and I have another child and I kick one son out of the house, I have not expanded my family. I have just simply replaced one.
To be fair, nobody really liked that kid, though.
Relegation.
Don't live in the shed.
That's it. So you know, and then I know the argument against that, and people will say, well, there's a limited pool of money from the TV contract, etc., which is where you say, all right, so the team coming in to expand, you're going to have to pay an expansion fee, which will be divvied up amongst all the existing teams. That should help make up the shortfall. Or you negotiate a contract that says, when we have 12 teams, this is the amount of money we get. But when we have 13 teams, we'll be showing more games. This is the amount of money. Now, I know it's easier said than done. You can't just simply go to a network and say, this is how much you will give us. It's not like that. However, the way expansion is done right now, the teams who are there are genuinely threatened by another team coming up, because they could be out and they could be out of the money. So you've got a system that's already designed to thwart anybody new coming in. Now, that's just my take on the matter, and I'm not saying I'm
You're
right.
foreigners, and you don't understand our system of promotion and relegation. The dream that one day,
It's so important.
I know the dream that one day, I don't want to pick a northern town to upset the people from that town. Well, one day.
Don't forget
top
we're in
food-
Featherstone. next
We
week,
are in
so-
Featherstone. Next week we're live in Featherstone.
But, okay, so
We might not
send,
be live afterwards, but we are live there.
so send 2 teams up and 1 down. You still have promotion and relegation.
I
There,
think
there are ways around this if people are willing to sit down and say, how can we make this work? Not, this is not the way it's been done, so we can't do it.
I kind of like the concept of promotion.
Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it's worked in football for years, right?
But
It's
you,
different than North American.
You can
sports.
still have a licensed franchise-based system and an element of promotion relegation. It's just how much time you give to teams to be able to develop. And we use the Catalan Dragons example on many an occasion, that when they were first brought into Super League, they had a 3-year moratorium on relegation. And in one of those years, they would have been relegated. But because they were given the chance to breathe, and the investors were given a slight return early on, and they could test the market and see whether it was genuine or not, 15 years down the line, they're winning the cup, they're getting to the grand final, they're playing in Barcelona in front of the biggest crowd Super League have ever had. So it's about what everybody's prepared to invest for the good of the whole. And we're at a very interesting point, but that's nothing to do with you, because you don't want to get tainted by any of this. You just,
I had a very
you're just a
interesting
breath
chat.
of fresh air, and I don't get bogged down.
This
with
is like
promotion
therapy.
relegation.
This is therapy for me and Phil again. 'Cause
It is.
It's been, obviously, the last couple of years have been rubbish, but on and off the field. But you know, so many little things like the wheelchair games, which we
The
were looking
women's-
to go to earlier in
where
the
the
year.
women's game might get
you
to.
know, everything that isn't men's Super League. and
Yeah, well,
possibly-
even the Masters on
yeah,
Sunday.
It's
which,
all.
you know.
It's keeping us.
I've been
sane.
told that Masters is one of the biggest growing aspects of the sport of rugby league right now.
It will be in terms of participation. But the fact is that watching that game, you were at a rugby league game. There were no concessions. A bit like, wheelchair, you think, well, it won't be rugby league. It'd be a bit like what rugby union call wheelchair rugby, which is forward passes and very little contact, and it's actually basketball with a different shaped ball. But you watch wheelchair rugby league, and within 5 minutes you've forgotten that it's wheelchair. It's just rugby league, and it's the same with watching you on Sunday at the Masters. It's great that you different shorts and that everybody's very polite when they're shaking hands with each other beforehand, and there's a great deal of respect. And then the game starts. You go, yep, it's proper rugby league.
Yep.
And one of the moves that I have to say your opponents put on, which didn't lead to a try because your cover defence was so good. It could have come out of any rugby league game. A little run around and somebody dropped through a hole and support on the outside, and you just go, yeah, that's rugby league. I could watch that all day. And it's Masters. Well, yeah, it isn't.
But here's the question: how many of you are going to be playing until you're 80?
Oh, for sure. On my birthday, I was getting birthday messages, and I said, one step closer to those blue shorts. Yeah.
As long as I'm not physically unable to play, I will be there. And there is the option as well for those who are injured to play Masters as well. So sooner or later, time catches up to all of us. But I'm hoping I've got at least 30 years left in the game.
Yeah. That's why I alluded earlier. I'm happy to be starting my Masters Rugby League career. Right, I plan to make this as long as I can. And I mean, let's be honest, the game is so damn addicting when you play. It really is. And the more that we can get people out and enjoy this and feel that addiction, it's going to build. It's in the North American market in Canada.
Well, I also think in the North American market, you've got true North American football. This sport plays so well for those guys that used to play higher level football, etc. You're now in your 40s. You still want to run, and you still want to hit, and you choose that level of contact that you want. Even if you're a white short, if you're 35 plus and you want to run in for little contact, you can kind of engage with little contact. If you want to, run full out and enjoy it.
Blue shorts, straight into blue. I'm not taking it. I'm going to be straight into blue shorts. I mean, that's a thing we take for granted because we've grown up with it. But if you've grown up around gridiron, either Canadian or American, the amount of padding, helmets, and to go from that to this, to us, we just this is what we've grown up with. Does it feel?
To me, it feels safer. Because, and it's the same thing that's happened in hockey. You throw body armor on, you throw a helmet on, all of a sudden your body's a projectile, right? I'm just there to. But it's like you have no padding on no padding. You think pretty clearly about how you're going to tackle that person because you're feeling the same effects.
You feel almost like you're armored up and therefore you're invincible, and so you play recklessly. So you get people leading with the head in gridiron or in hockey even, because you think, I'm not going to hurt my head. The reality is you certainly can when you've got a helmet on. But as Greg said, you have to really think more about what you're doing. We don't want anybody to get hurt out there. We want everybody to come back the next week. Although we do want them to feel it.
And a little bit of bruising on a Monday morning.
Feel it, you do. Feel it, you do.
Yeah. That first hit I took on Sunday, I felt it.
Bring back shoulder
We all
pads.
felt it, I think.
when did shoulder pads go? They were great. Everyone in the 90s looking like gridiron players. It was ridiculous.
I just think I think not having it is a really great aspect of it because it's, listen, I'm coming in there, you're coming in there, and you will properly tackle me. Or if I'm not prepared for what it is, then the next play, I will know how I'm supposed to be driving the ball forward, right?
There's an authenticity about it.
Big time. Big time. Yeah. At the end of the day, for us, I mean, we go to work on Monday, right?
Yeah.
And we have that respect for each other.
Work.
Now, having said that ties back into the friend group. So, because I'm not that far away from the end of my teaching career, I've got fewer than 5 years to go, and then I'm done and I retire. I was saying to my wife, I've got a brand new sort of friend group because of rugby league. There's a whole new crowd of people, all different, diverse walks of life, and with only a slight amount of sarcasm, she said, "No, you've actually got friends now." She said that the people you know and you hang out with are all your work colleagues. When you are done your career and you leave that environment, are you still going to be maintaining contact with them all the time? And she didn't think that was the case. And honestly, I love my colleagues, I love my coworkers, they're great people, but when it's social time, I don't want to talk shop all the time. I don't want to get together with them and just talk about my career or talk about what we do for a living. You need that break. I have that with these guys. We can talk about whatever. and we've got a diverse group of ages, to diverse backgrounds. There's never a conversation that we can't carry on for days.
Well, my wife jokes consistently. She's like, how come you go out for 11 o'clock start, yet you come back so late in the afternoon, you're only playing for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's just because you sit there afterwards, and it's brotherhood, it's camaraderie, right? Like, it's great to just have a pint with, the lads and just enjoy yourself.
And you keep the older players in the game who, a lot of them, when they age out, and I'm talking to some former guys from rugby union, and they've said once they reach a stage where they can't play anymore, they drift away. They no longer attend the club. You've lost the history there. You've lost what they contributed. You don't lose that with us. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just wanted to touch on the mental health aspect, right? Of getting together on the Sunday, playing, blood, sweat, and tears out on the field, and then shaking hands and hugging after the game and sharing the pint and shooting the shit, right?
Yeah.
And the mental health, especially during COVID, right? Getting out, being able to meet, you can never understate that. It's been incredible. It's a great journey, and I think you say the boys club, but getting everybody together and being able to have that family aspect has been tremendous for mental health.
And it's not just that, right? Like we had the game against the ladies and stuff, and we had full families coming out.
Yeah.
It was awesome to have my children come out and my wife come out, my dad and my stepmom come out and watch, and it's like, that's what it's about, and that's the groundswell of sort of building the sport in Canada that I think is so impressive.
For sure. I feel so much pride doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you must be looking forward to looking around Headingley, because obviously having had the guided tour of Wakefield that I gave you a couple of years ago, and go to a stadium which was also built at the same time and looks like it still did. It must be nice to go to a modern facility and have a look around one of the great cathedrals of British sport.
Well, when I came in 2019, I was talking with you guys, and I said, on the day that I'm in this area, there's 3 matches on. Which one do you recommend I go to? And one of them, there was a match available at Leeds. Leeds wasn't doing so well at that time when I was planning it. And then, the Leeds in crisis, sure. But then you said, well, come to Wakefield and see what rugby league was like 100 years ago.
My club. Come to Wakefield.
And so I went there and I experienced Wakefield hosting Castleford, and it was a really neat experience. I was a little hesitant to reveal underneath my black jacket I had on my Toronto Wolfpack jersey, because I just wasn't sure what the reaction was going to be.
No foreigners allowed in Wakefield. No.
But I had a great
Not
time.
even Castleford people allowed.
No.
I had a great time. I came with my youngest son, who's also with me on this tour. He's 14 now. And we had a really good time. We enjoyed it, and then we ran and almost missed the train because we couldn't find the station. But apart from that, it was a really good experience. I'm looking forward to seeing Leeds, and I'm looking forward to going to Leigh. Now, we won't be at Leigh Sports Village, the main ground, but we will be at Leigh East. I really enjoyed seeing Hunslet's ground. I can't speak for the rest of the gentlemen, but
Yeah, it was very cool.
it was really nice, a really good facility. I quite like that.
I like Hunslet's.
Especially when the Middleton Railway goes behind the...
People who knock athletics tracks around stadiums, I just don't understand. It's just, you play where you can. Rather than playing a park.
Well, I think it makes the most sense from an economic standpoint. Like, who cares that there's an athletic track around?
People on the internet.
At Lamport, of course, we had the criticisms about the fact that the lines on the field were reminiscent of a Jackson Pollock painting.
Where's Rodster? Where is he?
And of course, it's an artificial pitch, and it's concrete. It was just the height of Soviet architecture, and then after the match,
I would love Bellevue to be Soviet. Yeah, mate.
well, after the match, so the players could come up, and they could say hello to us and shake all our hands. And when they were saying, "Thanks for coming out. Come back next week," no other team in Toronto ever does that.
Well, no other team would even talk to you. You imagine
No.
you get a handshake from Toronto Maple Leafs?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, that's what sold me on the experience. And after I bought my season 1 tickets, I brought my kids a bunch of times, and I went with my dad, my stepmother, and my wife came every time that she wasn't working, and it was awesome. And after every game, you do the tour, and it would be both teams, everybody giving you a handshake, and the players would just say, thanks very much for the support. People, no hesitation about giving autographs and Sharpies and things.
Shoes, giving their shoes.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely.
And the kit managers and things, they were lots of fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and
They were following behind her. Could I have those?
Yeah.
Got one pair. He's giving them away.
Seriously, that was for the camera.
Yeah.
yeah, they had the photo coming back with us. But those people though, we know them now still. Like we talk to
Mhm.
the former players, we talk to the former managers, whether it be John Pallett or Simon Gelder, a fantastic man, Bob Bezic, all those players. They still, yes, they were screwed over by some of the things that happened, but they didn't take it out on us. They understand that we were there because we love the sport, and they're very grateful and thankful to us for the support we gave them.
And I think that love's come over today in everything that you've been saying, and that's what the sport needs more of. That while we are warring factions a lot of the time, particularly at the moment while everybody's deciding what direction they go in, the main thing I think, I don't know whether Richard agrees or not, just genuine love of the sport, of each other, of what it can be, of
I love you, man.
relationship. We don't have enough of that.
I think sometimes
There'll be loads of it at Featherstone next week.
Oh,
I just think sometimes you get so caught up in, you know, the weeds of what's going on there that it's tough to step back. And you know, us coming from Canada, where it's still at such a grassroots level, you know, that unbridled passion. I think it's refreshing for you guys to see that. Hey, you
Absolutely.
know, like as much as there's the struggles on the economic side, on you know, the leadership side, etc. Like you just sort of see us, and we're like, the game's an amazing game. Like it truly is
You're
an
playing the
amazing game.
Here to grow it.
Could I just speak to the fact that you're going to Featherstone?
We are going to next Tuesday,
Tuesday. We are live.
6 o'clock in person. We won't be live on the internet. We're live in actual person. They're letting us into Featherstone.
Bring rotten fruit, everything.
Right, I got something to say to Featherstone. So, at the £1 million game against Fev, 2019, those Fev supporters who came out of the stands to play us at halftime, thank you so
Yeah,
much
thank
for
you.
that. That was an
Thank you.
amazing experience. Unfortunately, the people who arranged that failed to tell you we were playing Masters. So when you, being very comfortably oiled by the fuel of beer, started throwing my guys to the ground, they looked around and they're like, what are we supposed to do? And I just said, give as good as you
Yeah,
get.
back.
And we loved every second of it. I went off the pitch with a torn fingernail, and
Yeah.
people had blood coming out of their mouths. We loved it. We went back and we just felt so good after that. So thank you for coming onto the pitch and playing, including the man in the Spider-Man mask
Yeah.
who said, please don't take that off because my boss doesn't know.
I will never
and
forget
to
that smile.
Mary of Castleford, Ayo, Mary.
That's what they're talking
Got their own fan club.
So I mean, at least the thing that will bind us on Tuesday is the fact we're in Featherstone, so we can just slag off Castle. Unless anyone from Castleford's on the panel, which I don't know if they will be on. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you here. Where can people watching this or listening to the podcast later? You said playing in front of small audiences. You're not seeing our YouTube figures. Where can people see you play this week? Where will you be in action?
On the Thursday, we're going to be at Victoria Park, I believe it is in Warrington. We're playing Crossfield Masters. There's a little bit of a hiccup with that in that they can't advertise because if they get too many people in the ground, there's all kinds of COVID restrictions that must be followed. So it's friends and family only. We've got a lot of friends out there, we hope, so that's all very well and good. But then the actual International Masters Festival is Sunday, November the 21st at Leigh East ground. It's going to be England, Canada Grizzlies, Ireland, and Wales playing, and I believe that's going to be filmed. I'm not sure if it's going to be live streamed or not, but everyone's welcome to that one. Fantastically, Andy Mazie went public with this, and I'm going to say it hoping that it gets even more reach. He said anybody who shows up to that International Masters Festival, he will give a season ticket to Rochdale and a pint. So,
What more could
wow,
you
thank you, Mr. Mazie. We
Yeah,
really
thank you.
appreciate
Fabulous.
that. That's outstanding.
Don't you dare miss it.
What if you don't turn up? Do you get two Rochdale?
Oh!
First prize.
Good job we're not in Rochdale.
First prize is one. Second prize is two. No, that's the home of Furyk. My mind. It's where he is now. He'll be playing long after we've all left the earth. I don't think he'll ever retire.
That's amazing. Great big smile. Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for having us in
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
It's been
Really
awesome.
appreciate
Yeah,
that.
True honor.
Great to have you.
Honor, Phil. Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time in the UK. Where heading, Leigh. Where are you going anywhere else exciting? No, you've been to York and Leeds.
Chester.
Chester.
Yeah.
Oh, Haydock Park.
Haydock,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good day at the races. We enjoyed a day at the races. Never won. Nearly won. Nearly won on Sky's race day a couple of years ago, but
Got our tweed jackets already for Hay
that's,
That's
it's
it.
perfect. People might think you're Ralph Rimmer. That's the concern.
No.
one for our viewers there. So we'll be back on Tuesday in Featherstone. Join us after that. I'm having to put too many people. But we'll be back next week. Join us then. Thanks to the guys from Canada. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have them with us. Support them if you can on Sunday in Leigh. We'll put the details on our social media. Thanks to you all for watching. Hello, Carsten. He's watching.
Hey, Carson.